So it used to be widely presumed that YouTube was not making a profit, that YouTube was either operating at a loss or just barely at a break-even basis. But the fact is, we still don't know. YouTube probably generates $16 billion to $25 billion in revenue. So let's just pause to appreciate how big the gap is between those two numbers that have just been presented to you as estimates. Maybe 16 billion, maybe 25 billion. That's the sort of thing a stock market analyst should know much more precisely. Everyone likes to complain about their job, even at the best of times. And needless to say, if making content on YouTube is your job, this is not the best of times.
When your life is just this tiny apartment and a couple of computer screens, it adds up. And at the end of the day, like our ability to make videos comes down to our mental health, which was, lacking. Earlier this month, I watched a video about demonetizing on YouTube called YouTube's Biggest Lie. And it really hammered home a very common problem with YouTube is that they just don't communicate with content creators.
There was a wildly popular video from a YouTube channel called Nerd City, in which he gathered together the perspectives of several critics, including those that support a really interesting lawsuit in Germany, backed by a trade union, really raising the question, what if we start to take YouTube seriously as an employer, as a company that has responsibilities to its employees? It's an interesting philosophical question. But I think it's wrong. I think this is a question framed in a way that's really looking at the whole situation from a kind of false perspective. What can I tell you? I don't have a better word than wrong. Stick with me here. I'll explain it to you. Here's where the discourse on YouTube was at in 2015. Most of you are old enough to remember this. YouTube, 1 billion viewers, no profit. So again, if you're old enough to remember, there used to be this widespread discussion, especially in, Financial Times, that kind of source, about the curious fact that YouTube had kind of global popularity and yet was at best a sort of break-even and perhaps a money-losing operation for this enormous corporation, Google. And remember, at one time, YouTube was a separate company, but then it was purchased by Google. This is part of a widespread phenomenon of post-tech boom companies trying to encourage the same kind of reckless optimism on the part of investors as was endemic to the earlier period of the tech boom. Many of you will not be old enough to remember that. So think about Uber, the Uber rideshare corporation. For those of you watching this video 100 years in the future when Uber has been completely forgotten, Uber was a self-styled technology company that basically allowed people to, in a streamlined way, use their mobile phones to order a taxi cab, and it motivated the taxi cab drivers, this is the important part, by offering them many, amazing bonuses and incentives. For example, recruitment bonuses. If you drove a car and then you encouraged someone else to drive a car and then they did 10 rides in a week or something, some threshold to show that they were really doing the job seriously, then you got paid a bonus. There were bonuses for doing the job and recruiting new people. Bonuses, bonuses, bonuses. Absolutely none of those bonuses, absolutely none of those payments were economically sustainable because the company as a whole was not profitable, right? And people who really started to plan their lives around doing this job for Uber, who thought, oh, hey, this could be a way to earn a living long term, then they figure out at one point, hey, these bonuses, these special incentives, they don't last forever. And you start reading in the newspaper, nobody's even sure if Uber can stay in business. It's growing, it's becoming a worldwide phenomenon, but it is fundamentally not profitable. So a company like that can't continue on the basis of being a charity with its employees as the beneficiaries. It just doesn't make sense. And on the contrary, the rise and fall of Uber demonstrates to you what the advantages are to a conventional taxi cab company. Taxi cab companies, they may be horrible in a lot of ways. My grandfather my great uncle was in the taxi business. I guess, yeah, that's who he was. Something like that. Anyway, I had family in the taxi business, believe it or not. When you're looking at a business like that, where you say, look, for all of its defects, for all of its inefficiencies, this is providing people with the ability to pay their rent and put their kids through college for a period of many decades consistently, then maybe there's something we have to learn from the analysis of that model. And in this video, I'm going to try to do something provocative and getting you to question YouTube and its financial situation, not in a vacuum, but with a kind of brief comparison to how the publishing industry works. Okay.
It's fair if you're saying, like, why you had one video do kind of wonky for a couple hours, dude. Get over it. I hear you. I wish I could have. It had been such a year for us. You know, I've been doing this 12 years now. And 12 years is a long time to do anything. And 12 years is a long time to do something that people have cared about the entire time.
So it used to be widely presumed that YouTube was not making a profit, that YouTube was either operating at a loss or just barely at a break-even basis. But the fact is, we still don't know. And one of the most fundamental rules of economics is that when people keep numbers a secret, they're not good. Nobody imagines that YouTube is fantastically profitable, but that the Google Corporation is keeping these numbers a secret, I don't know, for just creative reasons, for artistic reasons, because it's more inspirational that way. No. Whatever the reason is for why the numbers have been kept secret, not just from the general public, but from investors and analysts, it can't be good. So here's a much more recent article, 2019. YouTube probably generates $16 billion to $25 billion in revenue. So let's just pause to appreciate how big the gap is between those two numbers that have just been presented to you as estimates. Maybe 16 billion, maybe 25 billion. That's the sort of thing a stock market analyst should know much more precisely. If you have to round off to the nearest billion, that's a problem. When you've got a gap of 10 billion in your estimates, it's a big problem. And again, everyone presumes, Google is not letting people know because whatever the numbers are, it ain't good. It ain't good for business. It's better for business if you don't know. Okay, so between 16 and 25 billion in annual revenue, making the video service big enough to crack the top half of the Fortune 500. But that's just a guess. YouTube does not disclose revenue, profitability, how many ads it runs alongside videos, user numbers, and how often those users visit the site. All metrics that would help an investor, quote, understand the health of the business and its growth trajectory, close quote, said Mr. Patrick. So if you guys can remember when dating websites used to be discussed in the newspapers all the time, these would be precisely the statistics. So some new website says, hey, we help husbands find wives, we help husbands cheat on their wives, whatever. These different websites that were offering romance, very often the first thing they would be boasting in newspaper interviews and the first piece of information they'd be presenting and to the press or what have you would be exactly this type of statistic. So why would Google be keeping that a secret for this website you're watching right now for YouTube? The arguments made by Alphabet Corporation to the SEC for not disclosing YouTube separately, quote, don't hold water, close quote. Quote, I'm surprised that the SEC hasn't pressed it more, close quote, said Ms. Nareen Weldon. It's a legitimate question for shareholders given the size of the business. Right? So there's an open question right now in 2019 as to whether or not government regulators will finally force Google Corporation to disclose whether YouTube is profit-making, money-losing, operating on a charitable break-even basis, or what. But no matter what the scenario is, this has to profoundly influence the way content creators, the way we perceive ourselves. Okay? If the company as a whole is not profitable, then your role here is more like a parasite. You can't really be expecting to be earning a good living and, furnishing your house and so on when you're part of a company as a whole that does not work, that isn't profitable, that isn't sustainable. Same with an Uber driver. If you're making a long-term decision for your career, for example, should you be a normal limousine driver who does limousine rides between the airport and the downtown of a major city, or should you take the same car and drive for Uber? Well, I think if you look at the economic fundamentals of the situation, you're going to see why it is that the taxi industry has been sustainable, why the conventional limousine booking businesses have been sustainable, and why Uber has not been sustainable, and how you should live your life accordingly. If you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to do news, politics, you name it, there are a lot of different ways to earn a living through YouTube. I think if you look at the economic fundamentals of the situation, you're going to figure out that YouTube should really not be the place you do any of those things. And hey, let's keep this in perspective. Nobody is trying to do Facebook as their career. I wish I could say nobody was trying to do Instagram as their career. Bizarrely, there are some people who try to earn their living just by putting comments on Instagram. I hope I can say nobody is trying to do Twitter as their career. Maybe. But the fact that a website exists, the fact that a website gets millions of viewers or millions of participants, does not mean that it's a sustainable model for even the corporation that owns the website, let alone for the content creators, let alone for the participants. So let's take a look back at the book publishing industry. So obviously this is an article from Forbes magazine. Say a typical publisher wholesales 10,000 copies of a new business book at $12.50 a piece. Marketing, printing, and editing expenses might eat up another $60,000, and the author's advance another $20,000. As for royalties, the author might take home 20% of the wholesale price. This is a very generous estimate. I used to work in book publishing, specifically nonfiction book publishing, but you'll see in a moment. This is 20% is a generous estimate. Okay, but the only other note is he says 20% of the wholesale price. The devil is in the details. How do you define the wholesale price? Maybe with some publishers, maybe it would be 20%, but it's 20% of a very low price. Much lower than the price that's on the cover. The author might take home 20% of the wholesale price. However, he has to earn out his $20,000 advance by selling at least 8,000 books before getting any more. If all 10,000 books fly off the shelves, the author makes his advance plus $5,000 for a total of $25,000, and the publisher bags a gross profit of $40,000. If the booksellers move fewer than 6,400 copies, the publisher loses money, but the author still gets his advance. Hence all that risk. So everyone likes to complain about their job. Everyone likes to complain about their boss and their employer, and you talk to authors. You can talk to authors who have become multimillionaires through book publishing, and the first thing they're going to say to you is how terrible the book publishing industry is and how oppressed they are by their editor or the corporate owners or what have you. Okay? What we have here in terms of the economics that have just been sketched out to you, this is a very reliable, very profitable business model that has worked for at least 100 years. We're probably talking about 200 years. Things haven't changed that much, okay? And you know what? If you're planning what you want to do with the next 12 years of your life, I use that number for a reason, you'll see in a moment. If you're planning what you want to do for the next 12 years of your life, you know what? Being an author or even opening your own publishing company, it's not that bad a bet. Again, I used to work in publishing. Yes, the internet has changed the game, but the internet has also made many elements of the game easier and more streamlined. You can now print a book and then dump it in an Amazon warehouse, so you don't have to physically own your own warehouse and actually physically put a label on each book you sell. And when I worked at a publisher, we did all that. We literally had cats in the warehouse to prevent mice from eating the books. It was a kind of inspirational place to be. But, where you're involved with physically owning, metal plates that are used to print the books. You give them to a craftsman and they etch the plates and then you get them printed and so on. The warehousing, the shipping, it's a lot of work. So yeah, the internet has changed things, but it's made it much easier to find an audience. It's made it much easier to get involved with retailing and warehousing and distribution. It's opened up all kinds of possibilities. It's made it much easier for a small group of people to start their own publisher, print their own books, distribute their own books. And guess what? The fundamentals make sense. You're actually making the world a better place by publishing books people want to read, by educating people, by doing research and sharing it with the world, what have you. I mean, if, publishing books is a morally positive thing, it enriches the reader, it enriches the publisher, and it enriches the author. This is proven to work. Okay? What we're doing here on YouTube is no more proven to work than Wikipedia. Wikipedia provides information to people, but it does not provide a living to the content creator. Facebook. Maybe you're the manager of a Facebook group with thousands of members. I am, actually. I'm the manager of the largest Facebook group for vegans in Japan. Right? I do no work. It's incredibly easy. But I'm the editor for that group. I don't earn any money out of it. I guess Facebook, the corporation, earns a little bit of money out of people coming there and discussing how hard it is to be vegan in Japan, whatever, right? So the fact that, a portal exists on the internet doesn't mean it can replace the role of cable television, radio, or even the paper book, or in the same sense that Uber, taking advantage of the technology of the mobile phone, doesn't mean they can actually replace, the business elements, the economic elements that make it possible to really employ people and provide them with healthcare benefits and pensions, so on and so forth, from driving taxis and driving limousines. You've got to look at these things with a little bit of skepticism. Okay, traditional versus self-publishing. How much money can you really make? The math is simple. If you are a first-time author and you go with a publisher, you can expect the following deal. Advance $2,000 to $4,000. And then payment, your royalties, 6% to 10% of the book sales. I've definitely heard 5%, guys. I think 5% is common. 6 to 10% of sales, usually in two tiers, a lower percentage up to 10,000 copies, and then 1 to 2% higher after that, and 20% to 30% of the ebook sales. So this means that if the book sells for just $10 and you manage to sell 50,000 copies, you'll be making $50,000. Okay? So there are numerous absurdities in the book publishing industry, and what most people resent about it is exactly the authoritarian nature of the relationship between the author and the editor. I know I used to be an editor, and I was a pretty demanding editor too, all right? I wasn't going to publish anything that was factually false or grammatically wrong or what have you. I mean, I was trying to represent a standard of excellence, raise the quality of the books we were producing there. People don't like that. What people like is the freedom that you have on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, okay? Why is it that a news broadcaster on TV gets paid so much more money than I do? So I'm about to do a YouTube video talking about politics of Chile, politics and economic problems in Chile, all right? I'm probably going to do a better job than your local news broadcaster on TV Ontario or your local, I probably have put more hours into researching the situation, and I probably have something more interesting and more valuable to say, okay? Why am I not paid by YouTube to say that, whereas the news broadcaster on TV is paid really quite a very good wage, even if it's just a local news broadcaster that just reaches one town, one city? They may only reach, a few tens of thousands of viewers. Total viewership for terrestrial, TV broadcaster, not that great. Okay, unless it's nationwide or international or something, But they earn a good living. I don't. You know why? It's that same thing. Freedom. Okay, I get to come on camera and say whatever I want to say. I get to work on my own schedule. Yes, I get to make a video about Chile, but I don't have to make a video about politics of Chile. I could instead make a video about the politics of China or the politics of Taiwan or the politics of Canada. I get to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. So there's a difference here that's similar to the difference between someone who likes going to the gym and someone who's actually an athlete. Okay? I've mentioned this on the channel like 5 years ago. People call themselves athletes because they look good on Instagram. No, homie. Doesn't matter if you're handsome or beautiful. Okay? Being a real athlete means that you don't work out on your own schedule. You work out on a schedule imposed on you by the coach, by the team, ultimately by the sponsors and the investors. Being an athlete means precisely that you get uncomfortable every day, that you don't just work out for your own joy and your own gratification. You work out to satisfy a higher standard that's set for you by coaches, by other authority figures, right? And it's denigrating, and people hate it. And just like people love to complain about their boss, real athletes love to complain about the coach or the trainer or the other members on the team, okay? It's brutal and it's denigrating and it's exhausting, whereas going to the gym whenever you feel like it and taking a sexy photo of yourself and putting on Instagram whenever you feel like it, that's not being an athlete. And fundamentally, what we do here on YouTube is not rewarded economically in the same way, because this is not being a broadcaster.
Dun, 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 dun.